To today's extraordinary meeting, the first of 2 weeks of extraordinary meetings this Wednesday and Wednesday next week. We have another extraordinary council meeting. I'd ask you to stand for karakia and council affirmation. Whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga, kia mā kina kina ki uta, kia mā tara tara ki tai, ihi aki ana te atakura, he tio, he huka, he hohu, tihei, mauri ora. Let us affirm today that we as councillors will work together to serve the citizens of Selwyn District, to always use our gifts of understanding, courage, common sense, wisdom and integrity in all our discussions, dealings and decisions so that we may solve problems effectively. May we always recognise each other's values and opinions, be fair-minded and ready to listen to each other's point of view. In our dealings with each other, let us always be open to the truth of others and ready to seek agreement, slow to take offence and always prepared to forgive. May we always work to enhance the well-being of the Selwyn District and its communities. We will. Thank you, everyone. So today's meeting, we have two councillors joined online. Deborah, welcome, and Phil, and everyone else is present in the room today. And the only matter on today's extraordinary meeting is the adoption of the annual report. So Sharon, I'll throw to you.
Yeah. Thanks, thanks, councillors. Look, just very conscious of the fact that we are bringing the annual report to you for June 2024 later than we would ordinarily like. There's been, I think, fair to say, a number of challenges, but I really want to thank the team, and I also want to thank the auditors for working together to get us to a point where we are presenting today. Alison and Neil are going to take us through the report. The report went to Audit and Risk on Monday, and there was some good discussion. And I think, as I've said to you previously, it's really easy to forget that what we're talking about is for June 2024 backwards. We had to remind ourselves several times of that in Audit and Risk as time passes by. And what I would like to say is I don't think that there'll be any particular surprises in the report for you. Through 2024 and 2023, we had lots of discussions around some of the challenges, some of the legacy issues, and you know what you're seeing presented in the report as a reflection of those things. So I'm going to hand over to Alison to take you through.
Thank you, Sharon. I think everything that I was about to say, Sharon's probably already said. I think just before I hand over to Neil and he can walk through the detail, a couple of points to note. The service performance targets, they are linked back to the 21-31 long-term plan. They have had an overall for this year's long-term plan, but that won't be reflected into the annual report for June 2025. Sharon's noted some of the legacy issues, so we've got some quite large variances in there, personnel costs being one. We talked a lot through the long-term plan around some of the challenges we'd had, what we'd picked up, so that talks to some of those variances. And also, again, as Sharon noted, this went to Audit and Risk on Monday, and Shane, I think, being the conduit between those meetings, will talk to that later. And I think just for now, I will hand over to Neil and ask Neil to talk through the report at a high level.
Thanks, Alison. So the SDC parent reported a surplus after tax of $5 million. That's $17.1 million.
Neil, could you pull your microphone nearer, please? You're
Yep.
very softly spoken.
Sorry. That's a first. But thank you. I'm usually loud. Yep. So as mentioned, the parent company reported a surplus of $5 million for the year ending 2024. $17.1 million under budget. That's mainly due to revenue being $0.4 million favourable to budget. Some overs and unders there, but nothing significant. Mostly the $17.1 million under budgets due to an increase in personnel costs and other expenses like maintenance expenses, building levies, insurance and software licensing fees to facilitate the growth in population and the business. The other comprehensive revenue of $94.3 million is a non-cash gain, unbudgeted gains on revaluations of assets. On the balance sheet, the total assets of $3.1 billion were $80.5 million higher than budgeted, and that's mostly due to the fair value increase in our investment in CCOs. And our total liabilities were $19.2 million under budget, mainly due to lower capital expenditure. We'd just like to highlight that the $5 million surplus, even though it's $17.1 million under budget, is actually a really good result, considering the fact that throughout the financial year it was identified that the general rate increase of 6% included in the LTP would not be sufficient to maintain the debt level we projected. Higher cost of borrowing, increase in insurance premiums, other overhead costs were not considered in the LTP, but still council managed to generate a profit and also stay within the net borrowing as a percentage of revenue threshold of 160% with an actual of 89.15%. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Maybe Shane, do you want to just cover off some of the things that Audit and Risk spoke to, and Nicole, if you want to add anything to that as well.
Tēnā tātou katoa. Thank you very much, Sam, and first of all, thank you very much to the team for an extraordinary amount of work on top of an extraordinary amount of work. I appreciate all of the effort that's been done. Those thanks were passed on during the meeting. Following on from the Audit and Risk Committee meeting on March the 24th, the committee recommended to Council adoption for the annual report for the year ending 30 June 2024. The committee asked management several questions in relation to the report. Audit New Zealand were also present and spoke in the meeting and are satisfied with the responses received. Also through Annalisa and the committee would like to acknowledge Julian Tan for his 6 years of service to the council and the support and expertise he's provided to our team here as he rotates out of this particular council. That's all I have to add. Thank you.
No, I think Shane's done a good job. I mean, the main thing just to highlight was questions around so the challenges that we've had and sort of talking about with going forward and such, like for when we're doing the next annual plan, which will be very soon. It's the end of the year. Yeah, Sharon.
I think what was really useful is just as part of the risk and audit agenda, we also had some internal audit reports. And it's really great to see that structure now in place, and Deloitte's as our internal audit provider. And what was really great to hear was the fact that Deloitte's reflected back from where we were to how we're performing now. They can see for themselves that we have made the changes in terms of the framework, how we're reporting, and the structures that we've put in place. So I was quite heartened, and I think Risk and Audit recognised the fact of the changes and growth that has occurred over the last 12 months.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from any of the council? Lydia.
This is really great to see everything all in one place, and I think it is a long time coming. It would have been great to have this information a few months ago, especially when we're, this afternoon's conversations. But it is what it is, and so I acknowledge that you've had some extreme challenges. And I guess looking at this, what comes to my mind is the fact that how vulnerable we are to actual growth is keeping us afloat in a certain aspect, and I think that we need to keep in mind that might not always be there to keep us afloat. I think some of the things I had questions around was our personnel costs and staff costing. and, you know, particularly I looked at community services for the fact that I just question our budgeting on that. And the note says that we must keep facilities fully staffed, which I definitely understand. I just found it interesting that we hadn't budgeted for that in the first instance, and that the living wage increase had happened throughout the year. And I remember your predecessor that I had asked if all council staff were on living wage, and I was told yes. And so I found it interesting to see in the report that it had happened throughout that year.
Thank you. Yeah, so you're right, Lydia. So the living wage, I think, came into play from 1 September last year. It hadn't been budgeted previously. We did talk to that as part of the long-term plan. And I think the overall personnel costs, I sort of started talking to begin with at some of the challenges we'd had. So we had the 2022 November restructure. Unfortunately, some of the costs that came out of that were not factored into the budgets. Now, that was across the board. It wasn't just in the Denise in her area, that was across the board. The living wage might be more prominent in some areas, but we hadn't budgeted it. So the mix of staff has changed. It has changed quite significantly to what we'd had previously. But I think, as Sharon sort of alluded to, is setting us up for better success going forward.
And I look forward to the next annual report because I think that there are big changes that have happened. And so, yeah, I look forward to the next one to compare the progress and changes that have been made within. And I wouldn't mind if you could actually just amend my name in the report. I did confirm this morning I'm not divorced, so it's all is well in my house.
Thank you for that, Lydia. Noted. We will make that amendment.
Thanks, Lydia. Grant.
Two things. I did email the CEO about the management representation letter to governance. Is that forthcoming?
So that's actually in your diligent pack.
Yeah.
It is, yes.
Because there was a representation letter from the council to the auditors, but I didn't see the representation from the staff to the governance group there.
So that was circulated last night.
Okay.
Yeah, just confirm.
Correct. So that is something we will look to
What page is
implement
that on
going
diligent?
forward.
Sorry? I didn't
No,
see
so
that.
you're referring to the back-to-back letter of representation, so one from staff to the chief executive and the mayor, and one from the mayor and chief executive to Audit New Zealand. Is that just
No.
wanted to clarify?
No, we always get a representation letter, usually from the CEO, on behalf of the organisation to governance that the figures are correct. And then there's a representation letter from the mayor and the CEO to the auditors that the numbers are correct.
We can look into that and get back to you. on
Certainly
that
had one last year and the year before.
We'll look into that. Thank you.
I won't, I'm same points as Lydia, you know, when you get a $9 million blowout year to year in personnel costs, and a $9 million in other expenses is an $18 million swing in 1 year. It seriously questions our cost control. I realise there was a staff reorganisation, but a $9 million blowout in anyone's language is not good governance. And I fear we've failed in some of our duties when we allow that to happen.
Thanks, Grant. Sophie.
Kia ora, how you doing? I'm not sure what page this is on because I made most of my notes when I was reading it through the audit and risk agenda. But there's the only question I've got is within some of the risk focus area outcome of audit response pages. There's a lot of it does focus on the difficulties that have been had and. Just going to read out a bit there. The need for council to develop a robust consolidation process, thoroughly documented, and all that sort of thing. How do we think we're going to have that for this year's one, basically? Because I know that it's painful for staff and audit and governors. We do want to get this right, so I'm just wondering how far along we are, and do we think we can achieve that this time?
Thanks, Sophie. So we do have the consolidation model there, and I think it's just worth noting some of the challenges we had is we changed our model this year and how we presented it, which sets us up for better success. Some of the challenges we have had is with the pulling through the console information for CORD. There'll be subsequent conversations, and some have already started with Murray Lapworth and his team around the information we require for them. That was a challenge with this year's audit, and it had been noted previously as well. And I think, overall, I think like I've sort of noted and Sharon has as well, we've changed the structure within the team that sets us up for better success. And we do have a new audit team coming on site next year, so we will be starting the planning with them very soon.
Thanks, Sophie. Megan? No, sorry, Nicole.
These are some a bit more specific questions because obviously I was at the audit and risk meeting on Monday. First question, Council Mark. It's got reference Council Mark overall grading. I thought we weren't going down that route, and that's why I just question why that's been referenced in the report. It's on page 79 of the A&R Diligent and page 48 on the actual annual report. And I mean, we didn't measure it, and there's nothing more to say about it. I just don't know why it's...
That might have been something, Nicole, because these measures were included in the previous long-term plan, and so it's not measured because we didn't end up doing the work, but when we set the long-term plan, that had been an ambition to look at doing it. So this doesn't reflect in that year's...
Yeah, well, maybe there could have been a bit more comment around that, because it just seems like a weird thing to have in it, if you understand what I mean. Because I do remember us having the conversations around the table about it. And just a general one, I've brought up, like, we didn't build as many footpaths as what we budgeted and these sorts of things. So does that carry over, or what happens? We get start a new year, we start from scratch again?
There's an element of some work that will carry forward.
Yeah.
We can, through Tim at a later date, speak to that. Yeah.
Cool.
Sorry, Nicole, if I could just chip in there. I think some of those questions we have that you've asked us now, we have sent an email back to you responding to some of those. I'm not sure if you've had time to read those yet. Okay.
Thanks, Nicole. Megan?
Yes, look, kia ora kōrua. I fell into the trap when I read this, not the first time, but the second time, of going, of forgetting this was actually 9 months ago now. And so then when I was reading it through that lens, when I was like, actually, no, this is now 9 months ago, what I was able to really pick up is what's changed in the last 9 months. And what's changed, I think, is the reporting that comes through finance and performance on performance. And so some of the areas that were indicated as being underperformance, I see that we're getting reporting over the last 9 months that addresses that. However, what really struck me with this report is thorough. It's a great report, and it really captures the information at such a high level on the pages that precede the actual finances for each division of council, which was really helpful. By far, the achieved performance outweighs the underperformance, and I thought that was something to really acknowledge and celebrate as an overall performance of 2024 year end. And there are some things that throughout this report, it's such a good report that I was able to go, right, what are the things that I actually want to see now in finance and performance for the next 12 months, or well, actually no, only a few months through until September now. So that was really helpful to see. And for me, it was really helpful to see the reporting on staff and seeing that we have a really low low casual staff numbers. That's really important because casual staff are usually our most vulnerable people in society. Looking and seeing the amount of severance payouts makes me go, right, so I need to ask a question about workplace culture at the next finance and performance meeting, and CEO pay, huge discrepancy between the 2023 and 2024 that we'll need to address at a later stage and make sure that we really, as a group of councillors, understand why that might be happening. And so I just wanted to point out that by having a really good report, albeit old data now, really helps in frame up the governance lens for when we move into the finance and performance meeting. So congratulations, it's a good report. And I thought the major variances were really well explained. My only question on that is, why would that be at page 199? You know, the really great summary, 2 pages of summary, were buried at a page 199, which I thought would be really helpful at the front. Is that an audit requirement for it to be at the end of the data?
So the major variances note 29 is a audit requirement to include in the financial statements, but there's also a section earlier in the annual report, and I can do a quick search, but there's a section earlier in the report where we do highlight those key variances as well.
Yeah, because I was just thinking for the annual report for 2025, if there was a possibility to be able to really actually bring that forward, because as much as it's our responsibility to read all of those pages just for the public, they would be more interested probably in those 2 pages more than anything else. And then my only other question, I think you've answered, which is, oh, sorry, yes?
Sorry to interrupt. If you look at page 10 of the annual report, page 19 of today's agenda, there's also a section on the summary financial performance, which highlights the same detail as to the performance of revenue and expenditure and over and unders.
Yeah.
Page 10 of the annual report, 19
Yes, I
of
see
this
that,
agenda.
yeah. But on the page 199 and 200, it actually addresses what, the why. Yeah, anyway, no, great. Well, that's my only kind of feedback, if it's possible.
Thank you, Megan. I think you raise a good point. I mean, the information in this report, notwithstanding it is June 2024, but what comes through into the Finance and Performance Committee meeting should set the scene for what goes into that report, so there should never be any surprises. So it's enhancing what goes in there. Now, whether that is overs, unders, the staffing details, so when this information is presented, nothing in this should really be a surprise to anyone. So it's making sure that we capture what we can in the finance performance and within audit and risk that tells that story before we get to that point.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
And look, none of it's a surprise. It's just, I just felt that those 2 pages captured a great explanation that, you know, could be pretty much the highlight of the report, where people are looking for major variances.
Yeah.
And the other question was just about delay, and I think you've addressed that, like a concern, will there be a delay for the next annual report, but you've said you don't anticipate that.
No, we're not anticipating any delays. And I think it's also just worth noting as well, because we adopted our long-term plan late, I mean, accepting this is still late, but our timeline for adoption would have been the December as opposed to the October as well. So yes, we are still late, but it was an extension for the late adoption of the long-term plan.
And because this is the first annual report that I've seen, what's the ordinary time frame that we would expect for the 2025 one?
September? October.
October.
Yeah, end of October.
Okay, fresh for the new council.
Yes.
Great, thanks.
Thank you. Elizabeth.
Yeah, I probably don't have a lot to add, but just I reiterate what others have said. The operating expenses are obviously, probably I think for me, going forward, it would be nice to know that we're in some way looking at considering how we can address that, because it's really high. But I think at least what we're seeing here gives us good clarity. Accord's profit, do we see that making big changes with the local water? Because obviously that feeds a little bit of money, cash flow back in. Do we see that being potentially coming off this book with the water changes? And Also, just looking at depreciation, insurance and other expenses, they're quite unfavourable to the budget. And do we think we'll be seeing changes in the next annual report? Is there a new process that will give us a bit more an aspect to really tighten the reins, I guess, on those unfavourable aspects?
Thanks, Elizabeth. I think it's just worth noting CORD is a wholly owned council-controlled organisation, so any profits in anything that goes through would always be fully consolidated back into the overall group, Selwyn District Council, which is what's showing here. And separately, if a water CCO was to be set up, that would be fully consolidated into our financials as well. So no change there. The other questions, cost control is always key. I mentioned earlier in chatting to Megan about information that goes through the finance performance. So we would be looking at variances in there. But before that even gets to that meeting, we have the conversations around ELT with heads of department to ensure that costs are in keeping with budget where possible, and challenging and pushing people to make sure their costs are low. So that's part of general business regardless. Insurance, I think we noted through the long-term plan, that was one of the areas where costs have increased. They've increased for everyone. It's costs that we can control to an extent by virtue of what levels of insurance we provide. But we are where we are for this year, but certainly Neil and the team are looking at the insurance for going forward. Do we increase our deductibles that lowers our premiums? So there is some levers that we can play, but insurance has gone up for everyone, as has utilities and a number of other things. So it's largely outside of our control. I can see Sharon's wanting to chip in there.
I was just going to add about the insurance, though. We've also committed to a workshop with councillors because it's a wee while since we have actually reviewed what we're insuring in terms of assets. And I think as part of the long-term plan, we acknowledged that we needed to have a workshop, and obviously with Neil and Becca now coming on board to work with Alison, that's something we'll be endeavouring to do before the end of the financial year, to work through what are our opportunities. And it'll be a fairly robust workshop, I would say, in terms of making some really challenging decisions. I would also say, Elizabeth, that as part of the digital investment that came through the long-term plan, the digital team with the staff have created some financial dashboards that staff now can have visibility of their budgets. We didn't have the capability to visualise the budgets easily, whereas now heads of departments have dashboards that tells them where their budgets are, how they're tracking against performance. And as we get into finance and performance, we're also looking at forecasting as well. It's really healthy for us to forecast where our budgets are at. And I'd like to think that at the finance and performance meetings we have now and have had since June last year, we're having some pretty robust conversations around our month-end financials.
Thank you. Sharon, do you just want to cover the question Grant had around the different documents?
Yep. I'm actually just going to pass to Alison to explain.
So thanks, Grant, for your question. So what we have provided in diligent is what is legislatively, difficult word to say, required. And what we've provided in previous years is, I hate to use the term a nice to have, but we don't need it from a legislation standpoint. So what is in diligent is what's required from an audit standpoint.
I guess if you're asking me to vote for it, I won't vote for it unless I have a management representation letter to governance that the numbers are accurate and correct. So that's my position.
Grant, if that's not required legislatively, what is it about today's presentation and staff presenting it that doesn't give you that level of assurance?
I think it's about process. I mean, we've always had, so we're seeking assurance from our sole employee that the numbers and facts in front of us are correct. It's been provided before on an annual basis. We've had that report to us every year. Why would we change all of a sudden and say, actually, as a governance group, I don't need assurance from the CEO that the numbers and figures that are represented to me as a governor are correct. That's my personal position. It may be other governors' different position. You've provided a representation letter that goes to the auditor from the Mayor and the CEO. that's you're saying that I'm representing the numbers are correct. I want assurance from my team to me that the numbers are correct. So it's a chain effect in my view. That's only my personal view. I'm not representing other people's views. It's my view.
All I could say to that is the very fact that we're bringing this paper forward. We wouldn't bring the paper forward. It has been through the auditors, and the auditors have endorsed, and it's been through risk and audit. And so I can say to you as CEO that I am confident that the numbers that are there, and I'm really happy for that to be minuted if it gives you any degree of comfort or true and correct and accurate.
Thank you. Is there, I think part of this discussion too is, for me, is this is an intra-council decision, and so what we're doing is working governance with management on what the decision is in adopting the annual report, and then the letter is because we're working with an external organisation, and that's about the council's representation to Audit New Zealand, and then Audit New Zealand writing back to us about the work that they've done for us. So I'm comfortable that we're following, as advised, the legal way that we should work, and that staff, as presented today, and with Sharon's confirmation just then, we can approve the recommendations that are in front of us to adopt the annual report. Is there any other conversation on that people want clarity though? Megan?
I don't want clarity, but I just would say that in my experience, I have been in, management roles and in many governance roles, and I do see a management letter quite often, but it's not you. I've never seen it. That it's actually the CEO representing that back to the board. It's the standard management letter of an audit, and I think if, for consistency, if that is going to be the expectation that the council are doing that, the CEO is doing that to council, then we probably want that across the other entities that we are part of or appoint people to be directors of, because whatever our standard is here should be that which is expected in our entities, in our CCOs, but I wouldn't expect that. It's not a normal governance thing to do, in my experience.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you, Grant. I guess in Grant's defence, it has been something that has been asked for previously, has been delivered previously. However, in light of what's been delivered on behalf of the CEO, and you've given a minuted a statement, and what is legislatively required, and having read through both of the papers, unless other councillors feel that they need it, I'm happy to adopt what's in front of me, given that it is the legislation, and you've given me assurance and comfort through what you've said and minuted that the numbers are to the best of knowledge, and both the Audit New Zealand and Council true and correct. So happy to move.
Malcolm? You second that? Okay. Is there any further things? All those in favour of Council adopting the draft annual report for 30th of June 2024. Note the 24 March 25 Audit and Risk Committee endorsement. Received the draft letter of representation for the year ended 30th of June 2024 to be signed by Sharon and myself at the Council adoption today. Received the draft independent auditors report for the readers to the readers of the Selwyn District Council annual report, that we adopt a draft annual report, that we note the subsequent adoption of the draft annual report, and Audit New Zealand will provide written sign-off of the independent auditors report, and we delegate to the Chief Financial Officer the authority to make alterations of minor effect or to correct any errors to the draft annual report. All those in favour say aye. Anyone against?
Aye.
Declare it carried. Thank you. Phil, you were an aye, yeah? Doesn't matter. It was carried because that's
Yes, I was an aye. Sorry, my apologies. I was a bit late.
Thank you. And just as a conclusion to this, I guess I want to thank staff for the report and for the conversation councillors have had today on it. I found it really, it's a good reminder of all the things that council does, and although the start of this was over 20 months ago, we move on so quickly, and as a council, we always focus on what's coming next, next year, next month, next decade, our 30-year infrastructure plans, thinking well into the future. So doing something where we look back has been... You right, Bob? So just being able to look back, I think, is a different thing for us. Well, it's an annual thing for us to do. And performance and finance committee looks back over set periods of time, but to look back over the full 12 months for this year, we did a lot for a council, for our community. And so thank you to the organisation, Sharon, for the work that was completed. That brings us to the end of today's meeting. I'll close with karakia, unahia, te pau, kia wātia, ai, ko wātia.